working on too, will be coming back with to also assist the same population area.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council? Alderman
No,
Warren?
I'm good.
Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman Tolliver, second by Alderman Bug. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 24-0627, a resolution to accept the $20,000 Advancing Economic Mobility Rapid Grant Award from the National League of Cities. Who will be presenting on that? Oh, there, I'm sorry. I see you walking around.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Clark, Director of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. This was a grant we applied for back in April through the National League of Cities. It's a rapid grant that would enable us to partner with the Women's Business Development Center to provide contracting basics to business owners who speak Spanish. We will be delivering content in Spanish. There will be roughly 4 to 5 courses. And we designed this as a result of the disparity study, which found that some of our minority women-owned businesses felt that there was a language barrier. So we're providing this training in Spanish so that they can help grow and potentially contract with us and or with the state.
Questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
So moved to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman Bug.
Second.
Second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 4-0, sorry. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 24-0630, a resolution to amend an existing contract for a 5-year IT service management software to Ivanti of Salt Lake City, Utah for $129,483.05, and implementation services to Latest Solutions, San Francisco, California for $29,700.
Good afternoon, Chairman Franco and Jeff Anderson, Deputy CIO. This is an extension of software we've used successfully here in the city. We use it for service desk help when employees call the IT service desk to ask for help. We track all of our IT assets in here as well, over their lifespan, et cetera. We stood this up. This has been very, very well received by not only IT staff, but the folks in the city. What we're adding here now is public facilities. We used a kind of a homegrown tracking system on SharePoint for that we've just outgrown, so that's, need a new light, need a door fixed, those kinds of things to public facilities. They'll jump in here as well. And as well, we're going to stand up a service desk approach for HR as well. So this is just additional licenses to support the additional users needed for those 2 new groups.
Questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman Warman.
Second.
Second by Alderman Bug. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is 24-0650, a resolution authorizing the Director of Purchasing to purchase video conferencing hardware and services for Aurora Branch Courtroom Number 2 from Burwood Group Incorporated, Chicago, for a total amount not to exceed $123,972.10.
Good afternoon, Deb Lang from the Law Department. This Legistar item is being presented. We are expanding Courtroom 2. If anyone's been over to the Aurora Branch Court on the west side of the police department, that is where the court is held. Courtroom 1 is the circuit courtroom, which we, besides just being the public facilities, we don't do much with technology or anything in that courtroom. Courtroom 2 has basically been the same since the building was built, I believe in 2009. At this point, there are increased administrative hearings, an increase in the traffic red light. I shouldn't say an increase, but we are using that courtroom a lot more, and we do not have the technology in the courtroom for hearings. Council passed in the past year the Quicket Solutions, which is our hearing system, and with that we will need printers, screens to proceed with the hearings for administrative courts. So this item 24-0650 will update the courtroom to allow us to prosecute the cases as well as change around the setup a little bit. So it's easier to get around. We had ADA compliance looking at whether or not someone in a wheelchair can get around to witness stands, as well as having working microphones, TVs, and those type of equipment. So a much needed upgrade.
So, in the circuit court in Kane County, they have, in the court, I was just there recently, and they have people zooming in, and they got the big video screen for that. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, that would allow us the capability. Right now, we have separate laptops. We have an echo when we're trying to get people on Zoom. It works, but it's very,
Antiquated?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, so there's better solutions, and this would allow also the presentation of evidence. We're able to put the items up on the screen, so everyone has access at the same time of seeing the items.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
So moved.
We got a motion by Alderman Bug.
Second.
Second by Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you. Next item is 24-0661, a resolution authorizing the mayor to reserve and appropriate funds for the proposed Eola Road, Autumn Grove Circle to Wabansie Creek Trail Multi-Use Path Project, a shortlisted project for ITEP grant 2024 cycle 16.
Good afternoon, this is Rupa Anjanappa from Public Works Engineering. So the ITEP grant has opened up, and this is cycle 16. And engineering staff has shortlisted 2 projects, and one of them being Eola Road multi-use path. And the project limits are between Autumn Grove Circle, and it goes all the way up to Wabansie Creek Trail. So it's connecting, or it's extending the existing multi-use path all the way up, and will connect to the regional trail called the Wabansie Creek Trail. The overall cost of the project is estimated to be $3.75 million, and the construction cost is about $2.89 million. But the grant requires that we submit a financial resolution. Basically, they want to see a commitment from the city. And since this grant is a reimbursable program, we'll have to front fund all of the engineering cost. And the overall cost would be about $1.45 million for this, and we'll get reimbursed about 80%. The deadline for the grant is September 30th, and with this, I'll take any questions.
If we do not receive the grant, does the project move forward, or do we wait until we receive money to offset our portion?
That is a good question. So obviously, we don't have a CIP account for this project created yet, but I think the intention is to get the grant and then create a CIP. Since the project is expensive, we would rather wait to get a grant and then move forward, or find some other sort of funding, or through another grant program and then go forward.
So, if we don't get the fund, if we don't get the grant, we're not sure if we're moving forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
If not next year, it'll be for another year. Probably we'll wait another year.
Okay, so we're gonna, our goal is to wait to get some subsidized money to make it less expensive to us, and somehow, some way, at some point in time.
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
all right. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Alderman Bug?
On the blue proposed sidewalk, none of that sidewalk is there yet?
I think there is, so the sidewalk is proposed on the east side of Eola Road between Ogden and Village Green Drive. So there's a portion of bike path exists, but it's not well maintained and it doesn't connect to anything. I think it allows people to go on street, and there's an on-street bikeway. With this project, we are proposing to fill that gap, but at the same time do the curb and gutter and all that stuff.
Okay. Well, the alderwoman from Ward 8 isn't here, so I believe I can jump in her mind and speak for her. Let's, when it comes time, let's do it during the summer, and not when Wabansie Valley High School is in session. That's what she's gonna say, for sure.
Okay.
Alderman Tyler?
I would just say, I mean, looking at the proposal map, I mean, it goes through Ward 8, it goes through my ward, and it may even extend to some of your ward as well. But I would say the majority of the thing that I would hear a lot is the pedestrian, the bike path. So I think this is a great idea, and I'd say full support for me, and I hope that we get the grant so we can get this taken care of.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the committee?
Thank you,
Alderman-
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Allow me to ask a
Alderman
question.
Donnell, go ahead.
Rupa, in the past, like a gravel path was put along right next to the curbing on Eola. Will these pathways be set back from the curbing, or will they also be like a carriage walk?
The proposed multi-use path would be offset by at least 5 feet from the travel lane, and that's proposed to go on the west side of Yola Road, and the sidewalk would again be offset from the travel lane on the east side.
Very, very good. I obviously was involved in some trail work in this area back in the past, and I've observed that gravel path right next to the curbing gets a lot of debris and difficult to ride on. So I
It does,
think you have a
yes.
better plan.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve?
A motion by Alderman Warman, second by Alderman Bug. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 24-0681, a resolution amending an existing agreement with Granicus, Denver, Colorado, to add a service request management system. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. Let me go back one. 24-0662, a resolution authorizing the mayor to reserve and appropriate funds for the proposed Ogden Avenue, US 34, Montgomery Road to Southern DuPage Regional Trail Multi-Use Path Project, a shortlisted project for ITEP Grant 2024 Cycle 16.
All right, so this is the second shortlisted project for this grant cycle. Again, a multi-use path is proposed on Ogden Avenue between Montgomery Road to connect to the Southern DuPage Trail. So there is an existing multi-use path on Montgomery Road, and this will be a great connection. Right now, there is no multi-use path on Ogden Avenue, and we've received multiple requests for this project, and we feel that this is a great improvement, and the plan is to apply for the grant and see if we get one.
Okay. Questions or comments on this one? Hearing none, we do have a motion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman
Second.
Tolliver, second by Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So next item on the agenda is 24-0681, a resolution amending an existing agreement with Granicus, Denver, Colorado, to add a service request management system, annual cost of $68,292.24.
Good afternoon. Tony Martinez, Chief Communication and Marketing Officer. So this time I would like to go over the OneView 311 solution, which is for this agenda item. So as you can remember, in January, the Customer Service Division has now moved into the Communications and Marketing Department. So as we evaluate how do we keep citizens at the center of what we do and how to best serve them and how to best communicate with them, we looked at a couple of different things. Right now, the current state of how the citizens, residents engage with our department and how they engage with the service requests that they would get, there's many different entrance points, right? They can call the customer service. We have Info Aurora. We have the different city departments. We have, listed in the directory where they can contact every department. There's the police department, and there's also our website, obviously in our web forms that are available on our website, right? So there's a lot of different options, different entry points where citizens can call in, and then when they call in, it's probably not the best customer service experience, right? Where we bounce them around, things like that. So, as we looked when we added the customer service division into the communications and marketing department, the intention was to how to tailor our communication and marketing, right, efforts to how to tailor our messaging to what's coming in from the citizens, right? If there's a lot of questions coming in, how do we tailor that messaging? Well, right now, in the back end, it's a little bit broken, right? There's not a lot of data, right? There's not a lot of data to make data-driven decisions on how we communicate with our constituents. So this is why we started to engage some conversations on how do we look at some software that really kind of centralizes everything and really integrates the current systems that we have to better serve the residents and citizens of the city. So as you see, that's the current state. So we engaged some conversations with some software. We looked at, hey, what's the leading software out there, and we discovered that actually, gratefully, that Granicus was actually one of the leading software out there for our service management requests or customer relationship management request system that's out there. So as a technology snapshot, we currently have our website with Granicus. We have our engagement sites, which are our project sites, and we have our Alderman and Alderwoman sites that we're going to be launching, that we just launched to. As part of that, we have our email and SMS system, which we just we just share with our internal team. We just sent out the mass email and text just last week. We increased our email and texting database to almost 73,000 active emails, and that's all within the Granicus suite. We have obviously our agendas and minutes. We have our video management. That's how our committee meetings and city council are being broadcasted. We have our digital services, where our actual forms of our new website that we're going to be launching. And then we have our records requests and boards and commissions modules that we use in the back end for obviously our city clerk and our boards and commissions. So we're looking at adding the customer service component for this software. And why that's important is we needed to make sure that we selected a software that integrates with what we currently have, right? That integrates with our website, integrates with our engagement software, and also integrates with our email and texting software that we have with Granicus. And we'll kind of I'll get into that a little bit more to get a better understanding of what that actually means. So what is the OneView? So this is what they call their product, is their OneView customer relation management software or tool. Right, and the reason why they call it a OneView, I'll get into it in a little bit, but basically it just gives a OneView snapshot of when a resident calls in, we can see the 360 view of how we engage and how they engage with us as a city, since we have all of the other platforms that Granicus has. So it really helps us make some really educated, data-driven decisions on how we can continue to engage and how do we continue to communicate with our constituents here in the city of Aurora. So it really gives us the tools and guidance and data to resolve the requests that do come in on a daily basis. The key benefits of the software, right? It empowers citizens. I'll get into it and how they have their web application, have a mobile application, and then also has the 311 solution when they actually call in to our customer service center. It also streamlines operations. It consolidates a lot of systems. So we also need, when we look at a 311 and we're looking at a customer service solution, we need to make sure that it integrates with our current systems we currently have. We need to make sure it integrates with Track It, right, with the building and permits department. We need to make sure that it integrates with our public works department, right? If somebody calls in and say, hey, there's a tree down or there's a water main break, making sure the back end communicates with each other so we can send requests, send notices to those different departments and really be armed with that information when citizens call in. It improves responsiveness. And increases the interdepartmental transparency, so we know what everyone's doing, and also creates a lot of data reporting, so we can make those data-driven decisions. And then this software also is multi-language. So if somebody calls in or they interact with the app and their phone is already has a Spanish-speaking setting on their phone, this software automatically translates that into Spanish if they're interacting on the mobile site. So we thought that was very important and a key benefit for the software. So as we look at the OneView implementation of this 311 software, right, so we had the really busy screen of a lot of entry points going to 5 or 6 different, different departments. We looking at simplifying that, right? We're looking at simplifying how the customers, how our citizens, residents interact with the city. So if they have a complaint, they can go to customer service. They have, they can either go to Department City Hall with it's a walk-in, or with a primary purpose is to go through OneView 311 or our website and web forms, right? If they're trying to interact with us after hours, and that's all consolidated through the OneView software, which I'll get into in a little bit. One of the biggest things is that mobile application. our residents interact with us. Almost 70% of our website traffic is through a mobile device. We know that we have, a high, low-income demographic in this city, and through data, we know that low-income families, they may not have a computer, they may not have internet, but we know what they do have. They have a mobile device, right? They have a mobile device, and they're able to communicate, and that's where they do a lot of their website, their surfing, and that is also evident in the website traffic that we do get. So a mobile application really suits our constituents because 70% of that traffic comes through a mobile application. So Granicus, with this One View platform, does provide a mobile application and a web application. This is a current snapshot of what that mobile application is, right? So if they encounter a pothole, if they encounter a traffic light out, or they encounter a tree that's down, they can go right on their phone. It'll be a city-branded mobile application, and it'll also be geolocated. So if it locates where they're at, and if there's a street light out, it also integrates with our Esri, which is their GIS platform. So we have all of our data, right? All of our street lights, all of our trees, everything documented into that system. So if they say there's a street light out, when they bring up their phone and they select a street light is out, they'll be able to pick the actual street light that's out because we have that data in the back end, right? So then that way it's a lot more accurate for the citizens, but also for our employees to be able to respond to those incidents when things are out. So with that mobile application, they fill that out, and then it'll go right to the appropriate department for them to rectify that issue in the field. If you look at, we looked at kind of what that mobile application looks like. This is a staff view. Just a little snapshot. If someone fills out one of those forms online or in their mobile application, this is a staff view of how it shows up right in front of in the customer service or public works or building and permits, how it shows up on the back end for them. So it shows up as a different, obviously different tasks, different requests, whether they're received, they're opened, or they're completed. So then that way, whether you're a public works worker, you're a building and permits worker, whether you're a customer service, a call taker, you can see what's actually been received, what's actually been opened, and then what's actually been closed. So that way when someone calls in, we actually have the information right in front of us, right at our fingertips, to be able to best serve the citizens that call in, instead of trying to bounce them around or trying to bounce them, send them to a certain extension somebody doesn't pick up. That customer service individual can actually address their needs and see what the status of that request that they may have submitted through their mobile application or if they called in. So that was the mobile application. If somebody fills out a mobile application, right now you're looking at what the staff view of an incoming call is. Right now in our customer service department, we have our customer relations manager, Ricky Benjamin, our customer relations specialist, Christina Fenton, in the audience. Right now, when someone calls in, it's kind of blind, right? They just call in and we just pick up the phone. What can I do to help you? And we help into the best of our ability. We do have a system that helps educate our call takers to answer certain questions. A lot of times we transfer those calls, right? And then we don't have the data in the back end to be able to kind of evaluate those calls and try to modify our communication efforts. But with this One View solution, we can have third-party integrations where we can pull information from either the public domain, or if they've already called, or if we have their email already, in our database that we communicate with them through email or text. That comes in, and we can see that as they call in. So right in front in a call taker's screen, they can see, for instance, for myself, 630, I'm calling from my house. Oh, this is Tony Martinez, and this is what can show up when they call. So it shows up with their email address, their telephone number, and if they called in before on a specific issue, it has those activities and it has those requests that come up for that citizen. So then that way, our call takers are armed with that information. They can answer the phone and say, oh, so-and-so, hey, Tony, oh, we saw that you called in last week on a street light that was out, and look, it looks like we have closed the issue, or the issue is in progress, this is what you're calling about. That way we can make sure that we keep the citizens in the center of what we do and provide more customer service instead of bouncing them around. Now, our main focus, is to make sure that our customer service department is the front line. So we don't want to we don't want all of our citizens calling all the different departments. We want them to call our customer service department so we can be the front line call takers, so we can answer all the questions as fast and as efficient as possible. So also try to lighten the burden on our departments because they're busy in the day-to-day operations. So as you can see, we can, through the incoming calls and the staff view, since our email and texting database is also integrated within this, we can see if the resident has subscribed to different newsletters, texting. We can see if they answered the emails, they could look at the emails. So it really provides that one view, 360 shot of how our citizens engage with the city of Aurora and our communication. Like I said, the reporting is one of the biggest things. For me as a communication and marketing chief, of the city, data is important for me, right? Why is that? Because I can't tailor my communication and marketing efforts if I don't have the data on what's coming in. I don't know if I don't know the issues that are being addressed or being brought up, if I don't know the challenges that our citizens are having, if I don't have data to address those communication gaps, I really can't modify my communication, methods and our team's communication methods. So with this, the reporting is very robust. We can break it down into wards. We can break it down into how granular we want it to be, and provide that automatic reporting. And for me, that's important. I even think for aldermen and alderwomen, that's extremely important. With this system, we can automate reporting on a weekly, monthly basis on who from your ward is calling into to City Hall and why are they calling, right? So then that way you can also, address those issues or concerns or challenges that the citizens, residents are currently having at that time. So for me, the reporting aspect is, is a great, and integral part of the software. So as we look at all that, we look at the cost. So this is a amendment to the master service agreement. So we did it back in November, where we bundled all the products together, products together. So the yearly cost for this software is around $68,000, with a one-time cost of $65,000. That one-time cost really looks at all of the data migration that's all we have. We do have a software, Acela, that we use internally that will migrate all of that data from that system into this. Granicus will also do a business process review to see what we currently are doing, what's the best practice, and then also recommend what we should be doing as a city and how the different departments interact with the system. Includes the implementation, the geolocation setup, right, of all of our different assets throughout the city, and then just integrates all of our internal systems so we can best and effective and efficiently serve the residents of Aurora. So basically the conclusion is this OneView software will allow citizens to receive top-notch customer service during their first point of contact through multiple channels of communication, all while documenting and tracking the information consistently citywide. So at this time, I can answer any questions. Like I said, I have Ricky and Christina also as a backup to answer any questions in the current state of where we are.
Questions or comments from the committee? I have comment. I look at these slides and it says these different people that get phone calls or communications. You know what I didn't see in there? Us. So the real front line. So I'm just kidding you about that, but that is really part of the equation. The other thing I would suggest, though, is we're approving $68,292 for that service to be added, but we're also adding the one-time $65,565.96. I would suggest that goes in the subject line too, because that's at the end of the second page, and we really want people to see that. I mean, that's part of it, but we want it to kind of be up front. So I would just throw that in the beginning too, if you could do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman Talver, second by Alderman Orman. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Next item is 24-0692, a resolution approving a third amended Third amended and restated redevelopment agreement between the City of Aurora and Illinois Municipal Corporation and DAC Development LLC.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Alderman. As Alderman Franco mentioned, we're here to discuss and hopefully approve the resolution for the RDA for the long-awaited DAC development. And we're going to show some pictures shortly at 100 Broadway. Before we go into the presentation, I just wanted to make some observations. While today I think is somewhat historic in the sense of the magnitude of this project and long-awaited project on the riverfront, the way we have always looked at it is very similar to how we looked at all the projects that we've done here. In fact, this project started officially 3.5 years ago, which is when the first RDA was approved, but that meant that the work that was being done was really before that, which was really at the height of COVID. That said, we still followed the same parameters that we did with all the projects, Hobbs, Terminal, Copley, and that was to look at the gap. So I just want to start by saying that it's really very similar to everything that you've seen before, trying to identify the gap and then fill the gap for a worthy project. Again, as you look at some of the magnitude of this project, the incentive that we're giving is not dissimilar than what we gave Hobbs on a per unit basis. So what we gave Hobbs per unit was $45,000 a unit, and this ask, as large as it is also in that magnitude. If you look at Copley, it's got some incredible parallels to Copley. They're both projects that are in the 300,000 square foot range. The magnitude of the incentive are both in the $12 million range. So by definition, the amount that we would be asked to get approved today is very similar per square foot as it was in Copley. So whether you're looking at this on a per unit basis or per square foot basis, it is very similar to the projects that we've done before. The other observation I wanted to make before we really get going, and a similarity that I see with a lot of these kind of projects, is that the developers or the people that sponsor them tend to be young. They tend to really have youth and, not surprisingly, have an appetite for risk, have an appetite to see things that maybe others don't see. Danny is here. He'll talk. Fernando is here. We're going to talk also about the Galena Hotel after this. But again, they're young people who are very successful in their own right, but not necessarily the largest developers in their field. And that, again, is a similarity to the other projects that we've seen here. And the last observation I just want to make is that, like the other developers that we've worked with on these kind of projects, and these kind of projects become like a marriage because you really need to work very close together. And the only way it works if you have good people on the other side. And we're fortunate that we have good people on the other side. So with that, we'd just like to show a video. I know a lot of people have driven by the property in the last couple of months, have been asking what's going on, and maybe we'll just take a in fact, Danny's group actually shot this video with the drone some time ago, so maybe we could, Alex, run that. It's a good view. You could see it a little better that way. Let's just hop into the presentation. Is Alex Manella, you here? You come right up here too as well. Again, as the chairman said, we're here to discuss the authorization of the Third Amendment of the approved redevelopment agreement with DAC for 100 North Broadway. I want to highlight, as I like to do all the time, so it's very clear what we're asking for. It's an increase in the city's participation from the original approval, which was $6,840,000, to $12,590,500, or an additional $5,750,000. The additional funding results from environmental foundation issues, which we will get in great detail shortly, plus a new normal of higher construction costs, and we'll talk more about that. The original RDA was approved in July of '22, but as I said, we worked on it for probably a year previous to that. For context, let's think back or think about where we are in the economy and what helped bring us to this point today. The national cost increases in the construction business have been in the 20-25% range over the last couple of years, really coinciding with the time that we got this deal approved. And there's all sorts of statistics there. Our own engineering department does their own statistics. We talk a little bit more about that in the memo. Also, what's happened in the last couple of years, as we all know, there's been steep interest rate increases nationally. And the third thing, which maybe some of us, unless we've tried to refinance our house, have realized, tightened lending environment. So those conditions have happened throughout the country. As a result of this environment that we see ourselves in, many projects have been delayed or terminated, and that's true in the western suburbs, Chicago, all over. The loans that are necessary for all these projects, especially these big projects, have gotten much more expensive, and it's harder to qualify for a loan. And many lenders have just retreated from the market, and that's not unusual for a lender to do. When they're not sure, they go on the sidelines. So you've got a less pool of lenders. Now, in that same time, I think we've all read about this, the demand for apartments have continued to rise. So you've got this situation where there's harder and harder to get an apartment built, but the demand for apartments have just continued unabated. Next slide. So as we go from the macro to a little bit to the micro, the result here, how has this impacted us, and we'll talk about the environmental and the foundation issues that we've seen. The private lenders in this specific deal have reduced their initial commitment. So when we came to you a couple of years ago and we showed you a projection, it was based on a certain set of assumptions in terms of a lender. Well, those lenders reduced their commitment, even though in the last bullet point, the project costs have increased. So think about what's happening. The cost is going up, and the lender is lending less. And that's the situation we were faced with when we try to re-engage with this project and see how we could get it going. Next slide. You want to get the next slide? I'm going to call it, okay. Okay, that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up Daniel Resco, and what Danny's going to talk about is himself, his company, his team, some of his projects. He's going to go through them quickly. And then just a refresher about, especially for those who weren't on City Council when this was approved originally, a little more of the highlights of the 100 North Broadway project.
Hello, everybody. I'm Danny Resco. Nice to see you all. Nice to meet some of you for the first time. Look forward to meeting you in person. I'm the founder and president of DAC Developments. We're a Class A multifamily apartment developer based in Chicago. Started the company 12 years ago, and we've been fortunate to do, a few projects, similar to the one that we're talking about here on 100 Broadway. I'll give you a little bit background on us, and then we'll talk about the project. But just real quick to finish off David's point, just the current status, as you all have probably seen, we're well underway. We're under construction. We purchased the property and we've started construction. So we have approximately $8 million into the project as of the end of August. All third-party financing is now in place, so $75 million we're putting in. That's not city funds, so that's coming from us and our lenders in combination. And then as David said, this resolution is needed to complete the capital stack, as we call it in the industry. This is a little bit about our team. Not going to bore everybody here, but again, Chicago-based company. We specialize in suburban development projects and also downtown projects. So started the company 12 years ago. We've now grown to 13 team members, as you can read about on your own time. This is just a look at some of the work that we've done, some of the development projects that we still own and manage. So just in total, it's about 1,000 apartment units, and we'll touch on these. So go ahead, Alex. So this one is in downtown Wheeling. It's called Uptown 500. I've had the pleasure of touring Mayor Alex Alexandru, Dave Debo, a couple other folks in this building. Downtown Wheeling, again, there was village participation in this project as well. And what you'll see the similarities with these projects is we go into a downtown that truly needs revitalization. And this is sort of our specialty that we've carved out, is we work closely with the city, with City Hall, with finance committees, et cetera, work out, a way to make the project work and allow them to, see the vision, see the mayor's vision come to life. So this project is still there, and we're very proud of it. We did another one in downtown Des Plaines. This is a 212-unit building, opened up in 2022, and this building is now full as well. And then our most recent completed project is actually downtown Chicago. You could kind of sort of see it in that third picture, but this is on the former Cabrini Green site in downtown Chicago. So it was a former public housing project that the city wanted to kind of revitalize and do something new, and we were fortunate to work with them and get that project. This one is also completed, finished April of last year, now full. So we're proud of that. And that brings us to downtown Aurora. So as Dave mentioned, I remember the first day we met Dave 5 years ago. You jumped out of a car, I jumped out of a car, and we were sitting on the Dolan's parking lot at 100 North Broadway and started talking about what could be done and the mayor's vision for revitalizing the downtown. And here we are 5 years later. It hasn't been easy, as Dave mentioned. Starts, stops, raising construction costs, rising interest rates, pulled back capital market, and very proud that we were able to start the project. Just a couple quick highlights. The total cost, it's an $87 million project, roughly speaking. Again, $75 million is coming from us and our lending partners, and of course the city participation is part of that. It's about 350,000 square feet. These are a couple of shots of what it'll look like when it's done. I don't know why that video looked a lot cooler on Instagram and LinkedIn than it did tonight, but that's another story. 258 apartments total, 5 stories. What we really love about this is the riverfront and being able to play off of that. You can see how the building kind of opens up. So we got a courtyard right off of the river's edge right there. So right where that public sidewalk is, and then it feeds right into our courtyard where we got a pool, we got some outdoor barbecues, we got a lawn area for dogs to run around. and just kind of sets the tone for the whole building. That's all right. I was just going to finish it on the south end of the site, which you can't really see too well here, is a 5-story parking garage that's integrated into the building. So again, it's a massive undertaking. We're really proud to be here and seek your support. We're $8 million into an $87 million project. So just to give you an idea of kind of where we're just getting started, but like Dave said, we're fully committed to it. Our lending partners are fully committed to it as well. So. Yep.
So thank you, Danny, and to the whole team. Just a very quick overview. The concept and the goal of having residential on the riverfront has been a long-standing goal. There's been many studies done. I'm sure a lot of you have read some of them. This is just some graphics of some of the studies that have been done, but the thing that's circled on the bottom, vibrant riverfront, enhanced economy, places of recreation, all what we're seeking. So what we're doing here is executing on a long-held vision. Go to the next slide. In fact, we were looking through some of the files, and I actually knew this developer, but the developer came to you in 2007 with this plan. If you go through a couple of slides, just curious, just to see what they were envisioning then. It's 2007, before the crash of 2008. But you could hold right there. But this has been close, thought about. I don't know the percentage, but probably, 1 in 50 deals that are talked about actually get done. And that was, one of the 50. We've all traveled a lot around the country and looked at how cities are reacting to their riverfront. So we could have done hundreds of slides here, but this is one of Kansas City. I think there's a couple of other ones that follow it, one in Missouri, St. Charles. And this next one, I always thought the Yonkers community up in New York was not that dissimilar from Aurora. And that's a project over there in Yonkers on the Hudson. But the point is that developing on a river, energizing a river, having paths, having places for people to go and feel comfortable on a river is just such a big part of urban development. And we haven't quite been able to get going as much as we've wanted to. Obviously, that deal was done on River Street Plaza, which I had the honor of working on. Unfortunately, I was working for the lender after that project didn't work because it was 2008. And that was a good start. But here you've got this section of the river which is begging for massive redevelopment, and we're about to start. So what I'm going to do right now is turn it over to our engineering folks who have worked very closely with the people from DAC on what was on this site originally. And it was fun. We've told the Historic Society that we would credit them for these great photos that you're going to see. But there was pretty massive buildings over there on this site. And I just want Josh and his team to come up, talk about John, whoever, and talk about what was going on then, what has changed, and then get back into Danny and Brian, his construction person, and talk about what they found when they began to dig. Go ahead.
Everybody, Josh Ream, Director of Development Services for the city. As part of what you're seeing here, back through the late 70s through the 80s, all the buildings on the site that were demolished, we found as they started construction doing the foundations, were not done in a way keeping to anything you would see us do today. Like as we've been witnessing the Y come down, we've seen the effort that's been taken to properly take every portion of that building out of that site, remove it, scrap it, excavate, come back in with all fresh, clean soil, and as we're seeing now, kind of build it back up. This clearly was not the case on this site, and it's due to times and changes of standards or things were done. As they've been going through their excavation process to start the foundations, We found that in the most case, it seems like the buildings that we're seeing here that Alex brought up had holes basically taken out of their first floor structure, and the rest of the building, the masonry walls, brick, were basically dumped into the hole or cavity that was created in the basement. And as they were lightly compacted and filled, come back over with dirt and everything like that in order to kind of grade it out to the parking lot that ended up going where this building was at. In addition to that, below the basements, there were actually steam tunnels and other areas, sub-basements, that were left completely unfilled below the structure. So as part of the process, in order to get a secure foundation that'll be stabilized for the building in there, they had to do a complete redesign of everything from the foundation. So before we were doing like traditional footings with walls and a slab on top, they now had to go down, I think it's 143 piles had to be driven in to the ground now, brand new structure put in. I think it's like 243 tons of extra rebar and 4,000 cubic yards of additional concrete over the initial design in order to do this. I will say as part of their initial review of the site and additional drawings, they do soil borings. In a lot of cases, the soil borings they did were around a number we would normally see for any building of this site. So there was no kind of disparity, or they didn't do enough site investigation. A lot of them just happened to miss any of these areas, and they're in a small enough kind of runs and locations where you just didn't hit the spots that probably had the worst of it there. Then to add to that, as you start excavating these things out, we have to add additional fill. We're also taking stuff off-site that's contaminated now, because this is all a Wellworks industrial site. So soils we weren't planning on removing completely from this site have to be shipped to a new location. We also have groundwater that seeps in during this process that has to be specially treated. So there's a whole host of factors that have arisen due to the fact that this building just wasn't properly demolished back in the 80s, or this series of buildings. Then they had to come back, more design fees in order to redo all the foundation, and then all the construction costs they'll talk about as well. But just a significant change in what we're trying to do in order to get the building built at its very kind of base level. Any specific questions on that? If not, I'll turn back over to Dave to keep. Here's some of the pictures too.
Okay. So originally, we probably had an idea there's probably going to have some work being done on the soil, not knowing the extent of it. So from that period to what we know now, how much is that costing us extra just for what we found out from what we thought would be there to what's really there? Because as we look at increasing the prices and giving more money,
Yeah.
I don't feel that it would be incumbent upon us to do our
Oh, no,
fair
very
share.
specific.
To do our fair share, but how much of that has, let's say we figure it's going to be $3 million.
We have the exact number.
But now we're at 20 million. How does that, where is that difference?
Absolutely. So of the request of $5,750,000, about 80% of it or more, $4,060,000, so a little bit more than $4 million, have been verified as the additional costs. So we have it in, there's one of the slides that will come up a little bit later here, which will show that. So the original amount that they thought was about $1 million.
All right.
And then now it's 5 million something, and that differential, exactly your question,
Right.
is 4,060,000. What I'd like the team up here now, so now that you understand the conditions that they were met with, I want to bring the construction team up to talk about what they had to do to remediate that, and that leads to the 4 million. And we've got all this detail. I don't think it's in the presentation, but we got pictures, but we got all the numbers. So these guys have met probably 6-7 hours together, saying, this is my numbers, this is your numbers, and they've gone together, and that's how we came up with $4,060,000. So maybe you guys.
Sure. Yep, Brian Goss here for the general contractor, E&C Development and Construction. This has been a very extensive site in terms of excavation and what we have found. Our original expectation was that we'd have about 2 weeks of potholing and such to get through some of this excavation. We are now almost 4 months in and just starting foundations. So Past 4 months, we have spent going through, removing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of concrete that was just dumped over. Apparently this site, going back to the 1800s, they would just demolish it, pardon me, and then build like a 4-foot slab on top of it. So even after we found the initial slab that the last building was on, we were finding the other buildings below it, dating all the way back to the 1880s from the historical documents that we've been able to find. It's been a long process to get to the point that we are, but reasonably feel like we are all the way through it and starting foundations. Sure.
I think, yeah, happy to answer any questions, but to your, point, Chairman Franco, I mean, we did, I think we did 30 soil borings at the beginning. We always take environmental super seriously, and we did a phase 1, we did a phase 2. We did what's called a comprehensive site investigation report, which is a 1,000-page report, and we submit it to the state, and then they, at the end, give you a no further remediation letter. So some of this stuff came through that process, but then you really never know until you start digging.
Right.
And once we started digging, there were things that, okay, some of this came from the soil borings, but a lot of this was, beyond the borings or beneath the borings, et
Right.
cetera.
Yeah, and I asked that question because I think it's important, because I think there is somewhat incumbent upon the city. I mean, we know along that river, up and down, there's some bad soil there for who's ever been along there. So we understand that. We understand that it could be incumbent upon us at some point in time to remediate it for development. So I don't think that we as a city have a problem picking up some of that cost, because it could be on us anyway. So I just want to make sure that's spelled out, so when we go forward and people ask, why are we doing so much more money? Well, this is why, because that's bad soil, and maybe some of it is our responsibility in addition. So that, to make that argument, we want to know exactly what's going on. No fault of anybody in this building, maybe 50, 60 years ago, but, we still have to make up the difference somehow, some way between the two of us. So I just want to make sure that was out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, and then one point to add, all of the soil that we've had to take out, it is contaminated based on IEPA review. So we've had to take it 43 miles to Rochelle landfill instead of just a typical landfill right around the area. So that round trip time per truck is over an hour, and it just added so much extra miles and additional tipping fees because it's contaminated. It needs to go to a special facility.
Okay. And Dave, if I could ask you a question real quick, or just mention something. So we're at 15% now of the total cost. That's what's in the reading. We were at 10% though before, I believe. Right around 10%. Now we're around 15% of the project cost that the city is going to be giving. So I'm guessing the reason it's going up percentage-wise is part of this remediation.
No question,
So I'm just making sure we can tie those all together, because it's very important. How do we get here? How do we go from 10 to 15? From 6 million to 12 million, that type of thing. I just want to make sure that's all
No,
clear to everybody.
And in this presentation, we could, again, I have to apologize a little bit, but could you imagine just, so you've got 3 sets of lenders and, so there's still, even I noticed, we've got to have everybody update their Legistar, because even the document was changing in real time. But what we try to do here is literally define, again, to your question, Mr. Chairman, what exactly happened to cause this differential. Brian just mentioned about, carting the contaminated soils off. I thought there was a number like 700,000. So there was numbers. It was not just, hey, this costs a lot more money. We looked at it line by line to make sure we knew exactly what was going on. But it was extensive. And it's an interesting issue in terms of liability and who was there. But I will tell you that it's not that dissimilar when you go into the terminal building. It's because when you don't touch something for all these years, a lot of other communities, and that's why we show those pictures of those other riverfront communities. They've dealt with this issue 30 years ago. So when they were doing the Hudson, that was 30 years ago. So to us, this is new, but really the idea that you had industrial plants on the river, and then they had to be cleaned up. And if it wasn't DAC, it would have been somebody else, and nobody knew. And that's why I made the point sometimes in terms of your building values in some of these older buildings downtown, and I've said, I'm not sure how much they actually are worth in their current condition, because the cost, if you have to put money in as a city, then you could argue that there was a negative value. And I would say respectfully to Danny that he overpaid for his land, because he didn't know, because his deal with the Dolans was, I have to close when this deal was approved in '22, and he did. He closed, he paid $1.8 million. Now, had we known that there was $4 million of environmental, I'm not sure the Dolans, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
I get
that's
it,
just
sure.
life in the big city.
Right.
This is the way it is.
Right, you don't know. Mr. Alexandra, go ahead.
If I can just add, Alex Alexandru, Chief Management Officer. I also, obviously still involved in the risk management. So just to put a little context on this environmental situation, if you recall, while this is clearly the first time we've encountered this on this site because it was never owned by us, right? It was a parking lot owned by a private party. But if you recall, we ran into this significantly in the construction of River Edge Park. And so we know that that entire stretch from this location north to Illinois, this is going to be a significant challenge. And when we talked recently about the Get Green property, we've talked in the past across the street about Fox Valley Iron, these old industrial riverfront sites, we're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. They will have, it's not may have, they will have certain environmental conditions. And so to this point, they've encountered it. I'm not sure we realized we were going to find the archaeological finds that we did, but that combination and that last bullet is clearly been the EPA standard that the city has dealt with for years in other sites that we've had to clean up ourselves with that breakdown, and that'll bring it into compliance. There's not much they could do or we could do about where you haul this away and that cost, because a lot of landfills, there are specialty landfills that you can only take contaminated soils to. So context, I just want to give that sort of risk management context. And of course, it's a costly endeavor to remediate and replace to the approved EPA standards.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else from the committee have any questions or comments? Alderman Tolliver?
Comment. Just to kind of piggyback off of what Alex was saying from a risk management standpoint, for those who don't know, I'm a construction underwriter. So I actually feel like I'm at work right now. I feel like I'm pre-qualifying an account to look at or something like that. But I just want to attest to, the cost, it sounds like it's a lot, but it is on par with the construction costs that we've been seeing for the last few years in the industry itself. 100% on this last point right here, you can only take some of that soil. You can only take that soil to certain places, which is exactly why I do not underwrite for soil remediation companies, because I don't want to deal with the cost and things of that nature. So just to speak on the numbers, it is in line. Being a part of the city council for the last year or so, anytime we have anything that's going along the river, I just assume that there is going to be upwards of at least $3 to $6 million in fines, I'll call them, under after you excavate and do all that type of stuff. It's typical. It's what happens when you live in a city that's been around as long as we have, that had the type of industrial work that they had in that specific area. I don't see any problems with this. I was looking at the numbers for the last 2 days, and I'm 100% on board there. Let's get it done. Let's get it moving.
Right.
Before the cost increase even more.
Yeah, well, and that's an interesting point in terms of timing, because it's not really coming down. So we could just kind of, we've had a good conversation on this. Let's keep going on the slides. I think we're okay. Alex, you just move them up a little bit. So here's the punchline, Mr. Chairman, we were talking about.
Okay.
So the new total cost of remediation was almost $6 million. Originally, they thought it was 2, and the difference is the 4.
Okay.
There's your punchline that
Right.
you were asking for.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Next slide, if we can, or just let's run through all this. Let's just talk a little bit more about the amendment. Again, it's not terribly complicated. We're changing the timelines, and we're changing the amount of the, and obviously certain milestones, and we're changing the amount of the request. Keep going. And this just goes through 21 is when the first agreement, and then 22, and then the December of 22. So, and then, DAC this summer, and I will say, and Alderman Tolliver really will attest with it, is quite unusual for a developer to break ground while we're still in the process of getting all our financing together. But there's time frames in terms of winter time and so on, and Danny said, I'm going. I've got to go. I've got my equity. I've got the $13 million I'm putting in, 13.5, I'm going. And that's what he did. So here's a couple other macro ways to look at it. So if you go back to the Second Amendment, that's when we came to and said the costs were $68 million, and those were vetted. There was a lender on board at that point vetting the $68 million. And now, at that time, that cost went to $84 million. But we didn't come to you for more money at that point because Danny was trying to check the lending community. You know, what could he get from the lending community? Because lenders lend on a percentage of cost. And he was hoping that a lot of that could be sucked up by the lending community. In fact, what happened, and I don't know if this is in the next slide or not, well, we'll go through this yet, but what happened is that it was going in the other way. So if you look at the original underwriting, the loan, the first lender said, I'm willing to lend $56 million. That same lender is lending $45 million. So the first lender is lending less when it was $68 million. And this goes to your percentages and what percentage were coming in. And then now, at $87 million, that first lender is only lending $45 million. So in order to keep going with some more loans, Danny has had to go to what we call like a mezzanine lender, a second lender, a much more expensive lender, in order to get to his 65%, and then he put his money in, and then we put the rest of the money in. And that's how the gap is fulfilled. I don't need to go through all the detail. That we call it the junior lender. So there and there, I called it 1659. So those two, the 45 and the 59, is really what the lenders are putting in. The equity group is putting in about 13.2, 13.3, and then the other money is the dollars that we're putting in. We're calling everything a forgivable loan here. They were bifurcated. I don't want to go into too much detail. They were bifurcated in the first deal. The easy way is tax purpose and so on. We made it all forgivable loan. And this is another way to look at it between land and the construction costs. You can see what happened with the construction costs. The soft costs went up dramatically too. That's interest, that's carry. The soft cost, a lot of it was carry and so on. Everything, labor, everything went up. And of course the financing costs and so on. Okay, just keep going. So here's what we did. We looked at the total ask, this $5,750,000, and we bifurcated. We said, $4,060,000 is really something that Danny had no control over. Not that he had control over anything in terms of increased costs, but that was really something that maybe we would have had to pick up. So we put that kind of on the side. But then we went to Danny and said, Danny, look, there's still another almost $1.7 million above that, and we want the city to have a shot at getting back some of that money. So if your equity investors, who I want to say are taking some big risks, Danny always reminds me of one thing. The first lender is getting about 8% interest rate. The second lender is getting 14%.
Oh.
The equity, so if the second lender is getting 14%, if the equity made 18%, sounds like a lot, but not a whole lot more than the much more secured second lender. So Danny's saying to us, rightly so, if I got upside, I want that upside. I promised, I raised money back and forth, back and forth. Danny's a gentleman, we went back and forth. We said, okay, there are certain conditions. If you do 20, 30% more than what your projections show, then the city starts to share as a percentage. So you take that $1.7 million over his 13, it's about 12%. So we would get some money back. And then also, if in fact there was, let's say interest rates go down enough and costs do come down and there is a cost saving, then we'll split that 50-50. That's what we did. So we just figured, if we're overestimating, and we're sure we're not, but if we are, let's all take a shot. Let's hold hands and let's get something back. So that's, well, we got the construction schedule. Let's keep going. I don't want to spend a lot of time on he's starting. When's our end date stack? So you're targeting to finish spring of 26. Spring of 26. Okay, and then let me just say that the last slide maybe, and then we could open it up. So this is the summary. We talked about it. We could just go, what it is. I just want to mention one other thing, and we're going to continue to work on this up until Cal. There's been a lot of literature written about a city's return on investment when they do something like that. When we did the restaurant deals, it's kind of measurable. If we were taking, our sales tax, or you could measure if a business does $1.5 million and we get 4%, you could measure that. It's harder in an apartment building. So we're going to just show you a couple of parameters, but for Cal, we're even going to try to quantify it a little bit more. So if I'm sitting there and I'm you, I'm saying, okay, my investment is about $12.5 million. How do we measure the return on investment? Well, of course, some of it is more qualitative than quantitative. So let's go over some of the more easy ones, the qualitative things. The physical improvement of the site. The ugly parking, lot over there, what it's going to look like now, and the surrounding area. What impact is that going to have on the surrounding properties? Just before we walked in today, one of the adjacent landowners came in looking to sell their property. People understand that something's going on the river. Not just us, the bridge, River Edge Park, and so on. Statistically, there's always a measurable increase in property values when a property like this goes up. Substantial new private investment when something like this happens. The quality of life improves, safety, the aesthetics, the riverfront access, increase in short-term jobs, increase in long-term jobs, and increase in revenue for local businesses, more sales taxes and so on. And that's one of the things we're trying to measure a little bit. Let's get to the last slide here. There's these multipliers, and a famous saying, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So I don't want to, we could talk about all different returns, but there are multipliers, and we did a lot of research, and based on these multipliers, it's estimated that $30 million is generated into a local economy for a 258-unit apartment building. Obviously, there'll be increased tax revenues from the development. This isn't a TIF. Most of those will go to support the development, but the original taxes on this property were only $10,000. Those taxes should go to $1 million. We'll have 10% of that. That's $100,000 a year. That'll go into the pool of trying to get my return on my $1.2 million. I think that might be it, Alex. So we think we're done there? Yeah. Anyway, at Cal, maybe we'll take this slide a little to the next level. But I think, unless I'm missing anything, I want to thank my team, everybody, Alex Manella and Lupe and Selena, who was working until 2:58 today to make sure that we had this to you. I think we do want you to refresh your, because I understand the RDA it didn't make it, I'm not sure. But we've had another 2 or 3 different iterations, but the summary in the Legistar memo has remained accurate. So with that, I open it up for any questions you come. Yeah.
Questions or comments from the committee? I got a question. And then one slide that was just up there, $30 million into the economy. $30 million for how long of a period of time is that?
That's the life.
That's the life of the, right.
Yeah, and that's why. I mean, there was a number like. That's what we want to do a little bit better for Cal, but there was a $10 million number. But again, that included property taxes, but we're not getting the advantage of the property, so I've got to take that out and look at it. So, but it was a multiplier on 100 units, and we just interpolated the 100 units to the 258.
Well, yeah, so that's a good, because, when we do developments downtown, we'll be doing a lot of them and more people down there, it would be nice to know every time somebody moves into downtown Aurora, what is that person or people, 2 or 3 people living in it, what do they generate per unit? Whether it be over a DAC, as long as it's market rate. If it's not market rate, I know it's be different. But do we have, there's a formula for that, I'm assuming?
There's academic formulas, there's papers, there's university papers we've been reading, but we just didn't have the time. When we get to Cal, let's have that conversation. I think all the inputs that I gave you will be in there. We just have to slice and dice it in a way that we think is accurate, not just I
Right.
could throw numbers at you, but I wanted to have some accuracy.
Well, I think that would be good information to have, because as we go forward, when you tell us it's X amount, whenever we have a unit down here, then we're gonna know for future units what we're getting in our own mind. Say, well, if there's gonna be 150 in there, we know, based on the multiplier you give us, whatever formula it is, we can project that ourselves. Say, oh, this is gonna bring in 3 million, 4 million, depending on the development. So that's kinda nice to have, because I'm
Correct.
sure there's a generic one.
There
It may
is.
not
There
be
was a-
exact, but it may be close.
Yeah.
And then the other question I would have is, what are our projected rents gonna be? I mean, we don't know, may not know exactly, but
Oh,
do we
Danny
know?
does know. I mean, I'll talk on a macro basis, and Danny could talk a little bit more specifically. And it's going to be an interesting discussion as we speak about the next project. Danny looked, with a luxury property like this, Danny looked toward the Fox Valley Mall and what that incredible absorption that's been happening there. They just can't build fast enough there. And his point was, why shouldn't I be able to get rents like that? So as a perspective, when we started this exercise with the downtown buildings, when I was running the River Street Plaza buildings for the bank over 10 years ago, the average rent, because 30% of that building was rental, and the rents were $1.35 per square foot. When we worked with Harish and Jay and Mike Polakidis and Urban Equity, they said, no, that's ridiculously low. We think we could get $1.80 a square foot. When they opened their buildings, they got, and I'm rounding, $2.20 a foot. Danny is about 15 to 20, maybe 25% higher than that. And Danny could go through what that means in terms of dollars. But just to give you a step of where you go, and you need to go there because, again, we always try to close this gap. I will tell you that at that price, at the $68 million, we wouldn't be coming here. It's just, if the world didn't go against us on the cost, we wouldn't have to probably come to you and that's what we've been saying, let's close that gap, and we were closing the gap. The rents did what they had to do, and that's why I had that slide where I showed that despite all the cost increases, the rental demand is still high, which increases those costs and stuff like that. But anyway, Danny, you might want to talk about it.
Yeah, you're right, Dave, it's about 20%. So
Okay.
we're projecting $2.60, give or take a foot, on the rents. And that's part of this whole thing, is that we're creating the market. And frankly, that's why there's a bit of risk involved for
Right.
us. I kind of wish Dave didn't air my laundry with the banks and whatnot, but it is what it is. And, you know, we're proud to be here, we're proud to be doing it. And I'll tell you, you got a hell of a negotiator in Dave Debo, because the $4 million is the environmental, he's 100% right. And then the $1.6 million on top, Dave's like, well, you know, how can we get a return? And I'm, Dave, that's the cost increases, that's the interest rate increases, that's the construction world increasing. But, you know, we were happy to do it. You know, we want to be good partners with the city, and we want to be here for a long time. And
Okay.
we want to create the market, and we want to help continue developing the market, the other side of the river, and keep bringing Mayor's vision to life. So.
Sure, well, I do understand it. So, and I'm just throwing out a ballpark in my head based on the numbers you gave me, based on probably square footage. You're probably talking $1,800 to $2,200 a month-ish.
Yeah, on a one-bedroom, yeah, you're about 1,800. I think on a two-bedroom, you're pushing 23.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's what I thought, based on the square footage numbers and stuff like that, which is always good to know, you know.
Yeah.
And if it's gonna create a market, it's very good to know, because if everything's gonna be based on that, you know, we know going forward where we're gonna be about. Okay, all right. Other questions or comments from the committee?
Yeah.
Alderman Bug?
Thank you. In looking at the numbers, you know, when you go into a deal, you know, as you said, there's always risk. In a deal like this, I look at somewhat foreseen risk and somewhat unforeseen risk. So we have the two types. We did this deal during the height of COVID, 2021. So we kind of already knew that costs, construction, all those things, they were only going to go one way, unfortunately, for everybody, the world. not just you. The unforeseen, partially unforeseen, I'll say, because we have an excellent public works department here. I believe they're sitting right there. Every property, as Mr. Debo said, every property on Broadway and off of Broadway toward the river sits on what was once heavy industrial use. Both of those gentlemen are chiefs, and most people up here have walked in a basement or sub-basement in one of those buildings, and it's scary, including ours. But I understand that even when you got down there, there was, you know, the nebulous, it was below, and it kept going and going and going. And you know, that's just circumstances, and it's unfortunate. But we have to be aware, and I know Mr. Debo and the team, that these are things we're gonna have to take into account in the future when we're looking at these other properties. You know, whatever they were doing in the 1800s, you know, none of us were around, but they were doing some crazy things. And they left behind some, I'll just say crazy things that you found in your digs and going through there. So I believe, you know, we haven't gone too far that we can't, you know, get this deal back. I believe Mr. Debo and his team has done a great job, and I appreciate you wanting the vision to keep going forward. And as we said, some projects coming out of 2021, 2022, they didn't go forward. And so I'm happy that we're at the point where we can stay in this and make it right. So keep going forward. We're behind you. Just keep our eyes open and go forward.
Thank you, Alderman.
Any other comments or questions?
Comment.
Alderman Tolliver, go ahead.
So, I mean, obviously, new construction, like, excites me and makes me happy. I like to see stuff like that because then I get to keep a job.
We gotta have you on site more often.
There you go, right? Definitely, for sure. I won't bring my clipboard. I won't walk around like OSHA this time. So, I mean, I will say just, I'd be remiss to say, I guess I would say, from our presentation that we had about affordable housing recently, I'm not crazy about the rent prices. I do understand, I mean, for this type of luxury apartment, I can see why, but I would just say that I hope maybe in the future we can find another spot for you guys to build another apartment complex that maybe be a little less luxury and maybe a little bit more affordable for people. But all in all, though, I'm still for it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Alderman Mormon, go ahead.
And when this was first presented, I was new to the council itself, so this is very exciting to be a part of, and it's exciting to actually see it start to take life. So a couple questions about this. This is this is a unique design. This isn't something you have in some of the other places you walk about. So this is a unique design.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
and is there any retail or anything on the first floor? So it's all just the apartment complex itself.
Apartments and
Yeah.
amenity spaces.
And I know the big concern that people had was the parking. So there's parking on each level for residents as well too. Correct. Yeah. And I just wanted to bring those points up because I know it's with this actually starting to come to life now. That was going to be stuff that people are going to talk about. So, and then
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So the spring of 26. I mean, everybody's comfortable with that. There's no like weather delays, any of that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, is that how aggressive is that? I guess I would say so. Cause
Yeah, we have weather days baked
Yeah.
into the schedule. You know, like Brian alluded to, you know, we didn't think we were gonna be potholing as much as we were.
Sure, yeah.
Now we're starting foundations, and we're gonna start going vertical here pretty soon. But, you know, that's our
Yeah.
job.
And-
That's the task.
Yeah, a great project, and as Alderman Bugg said, yeah, I know, I can speak for myself, the council's fully behind us and excited to see what this is gonna spark for downtown itself. I think it's gonna be exciting, and to see this start is amazing, so good luck and congrats. So.
Thank you, Alderman.
Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We'll see if we need them. So we have a motion by Alderman Tolliver, second by Alderman
Second,
Warman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's 3-0, thank you.
Thank you.
We were all. All right, moving on to the next item, this is one where Alderman Warman will be recusing himself. Alderman Bugby voted 3-0. I was gonna vote for you, but All right, next one on the agenda is, 240693, resolution, I'm sorry, I'm not on. And the Barrera Organization LLC for the renovation of the property located at 116 West Galena Boulevard, Aurora, Illinois. And again, because my mic was off, Alderman Warman will be recusing himself from this particular issue.
Thank you, Alderman. It's a coincidence and not that we're bringing them both at the same day. One sense of me, I don't like to overwhelm you with so much stuff and so many numbers. On the other hand, the idea of we're moving toward 300 new units in the downtown, and everybody is familiar with the Galena Hotel. We've been working with this group for the better part of 7 months. Again, it takes us a long time to work to ferret out all the issues, to come to you, and the way the timing worked, because again, there are lenders and there's contractors and there's so much going on at the same time. So we're bringing this at the same time. I will say another irony for Alderman Tolliver is the way this deal is going to play out. We will have affordable units in here on a price, and I'm going to let Fernando talk a little bit more about it. But we had fun again with the Historical Society about looking at these old buildings. We asked them to search their records and confirm that Abraham Lincoln slept here, but instead they came back and said he did not sleep here. So he said, take that out of your presentation. So we did.
He wanted to sleep here, though.
So we did. But it does have a heck of a lot of history here. One of the founding families of Aurora, the cousin of one of the founding families, was an owner of this property. And this is very much more in the category of the 80 South River or the urban equity properties, the Hobbs and so on, because, what do you do with these historic buildings? And I have to say this one has even another set of challenges. So from, when you talk about historic, and this is going to be done using historic tax credits, which is the very good news. It's the very good news, because without the historic tax credits, there would be no way. We'll go through the presentation a little bit. The magnitude of this renovation is $1,000 per square foot. It's just unheard of. After the credits, it comes closer to $500 a square foot, and it starts to get a little, it's just incredible. So you could see how, again, just like Hobbs and these buildings, but for us finding the absolute right developer, but for us working together, there's just be no way. But this property has even another problem, or another challenge. This is a small property. We walk by this, right, all the time. You do. And the gross square footage is under 10,000 feet. The buildable square footage is like 6,500 square feet. So you've got to do elevators, you've got to do all the stuff you've got to do in Danny's building, but you're doing it, instead of on 300,000 feet, you're doing it on 6,500 square feet. So what I want to do, because you're right sick of hearing me, I'm going to have most of this presentation to Fernando, who's going to talk about himself and what he's doing. But it really, I think we have today a yin and a yang in terms of, again, same concepts, but in terms of size, affordability, and so on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fernando.
Good afternoon. Fernando Barrera here. the developer and founder and owner of the Borough organization. I must say, just to pinpoint something off Mr. Debo just said, I was really disappointed when I heard that Abraham Lincoln did not stay here in the early 1850s. So just wanted to bring that up, as there's many rumors and speculations about that. So ideally, I purchased this building back in April 2023. It took me a year and a half to kind of see which route I wanted to go, whether it was with a hotel, going and making this back into a hotel, boutique hotel, or making it into luxury market rate apartments, right? So I must admit I'm new to the development atmosphere, right? However, I think I bring a lot to the table, and I surrounded myself with great individuals that bring more than 90 years of experience in development, in construction management. And I think our team, I put together a great team this past year and a half that can make this development a success. So kind of wanted to go over a little bit about my team's background. So a little bit about me. I'm a Aurora native. I was born and raised here in Aurora, a 2015 graduate from Aurora Central Catholic, and a 2019 graduate from Benedictine University, majored in accounting and finance. I did work 2 years in corporate accounting. 2 years after that, I kind of put the suit aside and just said, you know what, I want to go full on in the real estate business. Since then, I have accumulated a portfolio of around 150 units. My portfolio mostly consists of single families, condos, multifamilies. My biggest acquisition was a 60-unit apartment complex. Most of my purchases have been distressed single-family, distressed income-producing property. So when opportunity arose about purchasing the hotel, I, at first kind of hesitated because there was many code violations in the state that it was. It was a very risky situation, and as Mr. Debo kind of mentioned, like, you purchased this not really knowing exactly what you're going to do with it, right? But I figured at the price point and a year negotiations as well with the seller, it just made sense to pull the trigger, and I wanted to be a part of the economic growth that's going on here in Aurora. So the architect, I have chosen Larson & Darby Group as the architect. They have done deals here in Aurora. I believe they've done the Keystone and the Terminal building here in downtown. They have historic tax credit experience. Bert, on one side, also has construction management experience. He brings 30 years of experience to the table. My historic tax credit consultant, this is another thing that kind of delayed me just righteously jumping into things, was the fact that I'm new to historic tax credits, right? So I want to make sure I did my homework right. I surrounded myself with individuals that had done deals before. I've talked to developers here in downtown Aurora that have actually done deals and successfully completed them through the finish line. So I got in touch with Ramsey Historic Consultants. John Kramer is the person that will be working on this project with me. And I believe he's also a key figure in making sure this development is a success. Kuhn Resnick is also part of the team. I have engaged Jeff Dow. He brings accounting, tax, and advisory experience to the table. He has done a lot of developments that have to do with historic tax credits. He'll be also, him and I will be working side by side to make sure that we meet all the requirements to be eligible to receive these historic tax credits, right? And making sure we stay on point with the historic tax credit investor.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
And I don't know if you know the answer or not. We talk about historic tax credits. Isn't there, and Dave, you may even know better, isn't there a time parameter or a limit, like it only goes for 5 years, 10 years, and then you have to reapply again, or is that in perpetuity? Because I know we had gone once, and it was going to expire, and then we had to get it renewed.
Yeah, so actually this building is on the National Register of Historic Places, right? So it will
It's
always be,
separate from-
correct.
okay.
It's different. We actually skipped part one. So ideally, we move on to part two, which we're waiting on the architect to finish his designs, right? And we're waiting on SHPO's response to the demo plans, making sure that the changes that we've done for our purposes are accepted.
Because I think I know what you're referring to. So the great thing about these riverfront towns in Illinois is is, that are in the river edge zone.
Right,
And I
right.
think that's what you're referring to.
That's exactly
So
what
the
I'm referring to,
river
sure.
edge zone has been extended. Now, once it's extended, it allows for a 25% tax credit. The feds give you 20, the Illinois gives you 25. That's 45%. So that's why I said if it was $1,000 a foot, it's almost like 500. So that program had expired and it re-upped. Now, once it re-ups, anybody who comes in there, it's part of that program. So then we'll wait until the next deadline. And what they did last time is that they actually expanded the number of cities because it's such a successful program. But you're right, but we're in the middle of the next extension.
Okay. But this is, in addition, this is different from that. It didn't necessarily have to have that, but that's okay. Because it's sitting alone, it's a historic building.
Yeah,
In
so.
and of itself.
So some buildings you have to apply, this is so significant that it's already that's usually part of the process. Could you is my building eligible for tax credits and so on? This one has already been, designated.
Okay. Thank you.
For construction, I have decided to take under my wing somebody who has experience, somebody who I know can get the job done, and somebody who, in a short amount of period of time has elevated themselves to a high corporate status, right? So Taurus Construction will ideally be doing the construction aspect of things. Them and I will be kind of tag team together on the GC aspect of things. He basically brings site management, advanced scheduling, project budgeting, trade partner relationships. I think this is a project where if we go this route, we will ideally save a little bit money on the GC aspect of things, but bringing in somebody who has this type of experience to ideally make this development a success. For finance, I have a good long relationship with Providence Bank. We've done multiple deals together. They have given me a letter of support for this project. Ideally, in the sources and uses, you would see they're for the project. They want to see it come to light, and the construction loan is looking around $2 million from their aspect of things. So the plan for this building is ideally to preserve the architectural integrity of the building, bring a shelter building back to active use. As I'm not sure if you guys have driven by there, you see, more I feel like every other month I go down there and have to put, another sheet of plywood up as, people try to break in since they see it's vacant. You see folks, trying to sleep in the back of the building. We try to do my best I can to, board it up, make it safe for everybody. But ideally, I don't really want to see a building in the city I grew up with that has boarded up. It's all shuttered, right? So ideally, the plan would be to make 21 micro units, fill the demand for a little bit more of affordable housing, but still make it market rate, right? So a base rent here at a micro unit would be $1,050. Here are the existing conditions currently, and keep in mind this is like after it's been cleaned and whatnot, right? So I did a lot of evictions, so I got rid of the cockroaches, I got rid of the bed bugs, I got rid of all the rats that were in there, right? So now This is kind of how it looks now, right? So unfortunately, it was in real rough shape when I took it over. I got it. I didn't know I was inheriting also a lot of personal property. So ideally, it is what it is at that point. And we ended up cleaning, and it took admittedly like 8 dumpsters to get everything out, right? So and ironically enough, it had a bunch of mattresses that, cost, I think nowadays $25 each to get rid of. So I assume that's why nobody wanted to take them with. So this is a typical layout of a micro unit that we put together. The square feet will range from 260 to 650, being one of the higher square foot units on the higher end. Most of them, what I really wanted to focus on was making sure they had an open concept feel, making them look bigger. They have high ceilings, so ideally it kind of brings you more into a studio type feel more than a micro unit, right? So I think the height of the units and the composure of the open concept layout really bring light into this and make it a little bit more bigger than what it actually is, right? So here you see the concept with the Murphy bed. So this is going to be built into the unit. So a Murphy bed that will be pulled out right at night to sleep in the living space. and be pulled back in as a couch during the day for you want to watch TV or you have a guest over or whatnot. So it's going to have a lot of functions in that aspect of things, right? So it's going to have built-in storage that can also help save on space, make it a little bit more bigger than what it actually is. Now here's a concept and a rendering with the sofa in place, right? So one was with the Murphy bed pulled out, and now this one's with it pulled in. Now here is my pro forma that I put together. This is based on the rents that I think I'll be generating. A little bit of the expenses shown here, management fee, marketing, legal, and most of these figures I pulled from other apartment buildings that I own and kind of averaged a little bit. Got a percentage of what my total rent is or rental income is, figuring out my expenses, my insurance, talking with my current agent, seeing what that looks like, and the rest, my debt service and my cash flow. And as you can see, it's very modest returns for the investment. So ideally, with these 21 units, we're really hoping that the 21 people that come in and live here, right, have enough, money left over or discretionary income to come and spend for these restaurants, the bars, right, the Paramount Theater and whatnot. So as you can see, the returns here on my end are very modest. And here are my sources and uses. So building acquisition carry cost, I paid $150,000 for the building. For the past 2 years, my carrying costs have been roughly $50,000. This is the federal and state historic tax credits. This is basically a really ballpark figure, but very close, as I've been working close with Cone Resnick on this figure, and we're pretty confident that this is what the numbers say. Ideally, we have to wait till everything's set in stone and we figure out what exactly the QREs might look like, right? There's some things that may not qualify for historic tax credits, right? So, but we're confident that based on our projections, that this is what these numbers look like. My construction loan for $2 million. Providence Bank, as I mentioned, is one of my preferred lenders that is willing to be on board and part of the team. Deferred developer fee. In order to make the numbers work, I'm not really getting a developer fee, but I really want to show a developer fee for historic tax credit purposes, right? But this developer fee is ideally going to be put back into the project. My owner equity of around $500,000 that I will be bringing to the table. Ideally, I have somewhere a little bit over $3 million in capitalized risk into this project. And I believe that should end my slide if anybody has any comments or questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, one more thing, my construction timeline, I totally forgot. So ideally, here is the timeline. I'm projecting 1 year's worth of construction, starting in mid-January. My GC and I have been really working together on seeing what type of things might be causing us significant delays in construction, right? We definitely want to get down to work and be ready for everything. And most likely, that's why I sat down with a lot of these developers and seeing what exactly is causing the delays, right? And one of the things that they mostly said was, make sure you get your elevator pinpointed, because one of the biggest expense is going to be an exterior elevator and exterior staircase. So ideally, that's somewhere in the ballpark range of $600,000. But we want to make sure that we start the process once we get the drawings in place to get going on everything and have no delays. So roughly 4 to 6 months on that. But everything else, whether it's my condensing units, my furnace, and everything, the lead times look good. So a little positive and should work for us. So if anybody else has any questions or comments.
John Curley just has been working very closely with Miranda, so just to give you an idea.
Yeah, hi, thanks, committee chair and committee. John Curley, Chief Development Services Officer. I have sat down with the development team, including the GC that they're bringing on board, evaluating their experience and the projections they're making for the building, the construction timeline, and comfortable that what they're presenting is achievable, and comfortable with the talent that he's bringing to the table to bring to the project so we can complete this successfully.
Thank you, John.
So just to summarize, the ask is this $1.3 million. Again, we just go back to this per unit thing. It was kind of giving me a little agita because when you do the $1.3 million divided by the 21 units, you're closer to 60,000 units. You know, again, there's no magic number, but we've tried to keep it a little lower than that. But again, all the numbers get skewed when it's such a small property. But what we were excited about was the affordability. When I showed this to Chris Ragona over at community development, he thought that it might even qualify for some of the incentives that the federal government gives in terms of home funding, but those come with some real bricks of, I think Fernando wanted a little bit more flexibility. It would have been nice to tap into those dollars. But from an income standpoint, the point is what those rents are. We just helped somebody get into the Lincoln property, and they're paying exactly this rent at Lincoln. And so it really turns out that this will be affordable, although the rents per foot are a lot, the costs per foot are a lot. It's kind of wacky the way it all works out. But again, we're very proud of this team. We're proud of Fernando. He's one of our own. He's minority. He's doing this by himself, real bootstrapping. And again, I'm really seeing a pattern here in terms of how we get deals done in this city. And we just need this kind of energy, this kind of belief. And it's not whether you believe in Aurora or not. It's really what Fernando said, and what Danny said too. You're pioneering a little bit. This has not been done. This micro unit things that haven't been done. Stuff in the river, it's different. That's why it's always trickier with the lenders and so on. Is until they get going, nobody, we hadn't done a Hobbs, and then you do the Hobbs, and it's great. I knew it was going to be great, but who knew? So anyway, we're very happy with this team, and again, I want to thank everybody in planning and zoning and engineering and everybody who's worked so hard to bring this one. And thank you for your patience to hear two big projects in one day.
Questions or comments from the committee?
Questions?
Alderman Tolliver.
All right. So initially when I heard 1,050, I liked that. But then when I saw the micro units and I saw the 250 or possibly 260 square feet to 650, what's the price difference in that? Like, what is a 260 square foot unit is going to cost? Is that going to be the 1050? What's the 1050, the higher or the lower?
So ideally for the 260 square feet, we will have 8 of those. Of those 8 will be a starting base of 1,050.
What's the 650 going to be? I mean, I estimated, of course.
Yeah, 1175.
1175.
I didn't hear. What did you say the 260 was going to be?
1175.
No, the 260 is
the
260. The smallest one.
260, 1,050. Base rent will be 1,050.
All right, for the smallest one. Okay. All right.
All right, man. All right, that's it.
Ideally, these small ones that are 260 will kind of have ideally the best view, because those are the ones that are on the second and third floor facing Galena, right? So the other ones that are a little bit bigger will face Old Second or will face River, right? So ideally, kind of offsets a little bit off her, but we're kind of glad that we were able to maximize, as Mr. Debo said, small space, that many units, right? So ideally, I think the demand is there. And I'm confident based on my portfolio that I own, that's half a mile radius from there. And that's ideally, when I get a call, ideally that's what they're looking for, studio or 1 bed, but people don't want to pay $1,300-1,400, right? Or they think it's a little bit excessive nowadays, right? So ideally, I think this concept will work. 1,050 base rent should really draw some attention.
There's one other thing I neglected to mention. First of all, I wanted to do a shout out to Alderman Tennell, who insisted that this property be included in the Hobbs TIF. And we had not had it originally. And he said, just in case, and at that point somebody else bought it. So I want to thank you for that. And again, this is a good example. Let's say Fernando didn't buy it. We might have had him buy it, because again, unless you don't have somebody with the competence and vision, we don't want to buy these properties. But again, if you get somebody like this, we step aside. I remember when we were looking at the Keystone building and speaking to the owner there, and that's when Urban Equity came to us and said, hey, I think I got this. We stepped away. So we don't want to do this. It's just we do this more in terms of protection thing. The other thing is in terms of the TIF. And again, it is a very generous deal that they've done, because as their return increases above 8%, then the TIF amount goes down to 50%. So we've got a sliding scale there. So if they do better than what they think, then, you know, the city will get that differential. So again, I think a very fair deal in a very tough circumstance to do.
Alderman Bug, do you have a question?
Not a question, just we were talking about history and everything. I believe, and I guess we can check with Mr. Jaros and those people, at least JFK, I believe, was at least out front of that building. I don't know if he walked into the foyer, but I believe, of course, there were people living who could probably testify to that.
I've seen the
So,
pictures.
yeah, he was right there. So that's.
All right, we got to put that in there.
That's
He didn't
something
tell
for
me
you.
that.
Just
Yeah.
ask Seville.
Ask Seville.
Strike that
He's
from the
a
record.
historian. I mean, him being out in front of that might get him extra money off too, because he was around at the time. Who knows? So, I have a question though, and just a curiosity. You mentioned early on you were thinking about making a boutique hotel or this, and I had talked to people that thought that'd be a great spot for a boutique hotel. What made you change your? I shouldn't say change your mind, but decide to go the direction you're going as opposed to the other way?
Ideally, this is what I know. This is what I love doing, right? Going into a boutique hotel would be my first experience. Not only going to that atmosphere, but this is something like, this is my bread and butter, right? So ideally, you know, there's a lot of talks, right? But ideally, this is the thing. And at first, it was only going to be, you know, a few. The number count was going to be less, and I figured, you know, the cost is going to be skyrocket high. It might not make sense, right? But after a few months of contemplating, I just said, you know what, this is my bread and butter. This is what I do, and ideally, this is how they keep to be.
In another life, I used to buy hotels for a big company, and it's a separate business. You know, there's such a specific expertise in terms of doing it, and that's gotten a little tougher because of this consolidation of brands. So there's 4 large brands, and no matter what hotel that you go to, 95% of them, it's either, you know, a Marriott or Holiday Inn brand or IHG and so on. So it would have been tough. I mean, we thought the same thing, and I will say, if for some reason he decides to change his mind, I mean, the fact of the matter is, the way it will be built, it could go either way.
Sure. Okay.
So I think it was an expertise issue, but it's a good
No,
point.
that makes sense. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, do we have a motion? I'm sorry, Alderman Donnell, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allow me to ask a couple of questions. I did read through this, but I didn't see anything about parking.
So with parking, as of right now.
/ your relationship with Old Second Bank.
In my mind. So ideally, I've been working with Old Second. There was a tree there, and I work with Old Second. I think we don't have, obviously, a really great connection, but I think, in speaking with Mr. Debo, we're going to sit down and talk to see what can be accommodated.
And we do. You heard about this garage that we're buying, I think, right?
Right.
No, we've got parking in a couple of blocks away. Obviously, the garage we own, and so there is parking in close proximity. And you know, even if you go back to the terminal building, some is right in the F lot, right behind it. Some of it's a couple of blocks away, and so on. So we've got options.
Okay.
All right, I have no further questions. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman Tolliver. A second by Alderman Bug. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 3-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we can have Alderman Warman return. All right, now that Alderman Warman is back, we'll move on. 24-0647, a resolution authorizing approval of the summer 2024 historic preservation grants and allowing the mayor to enter into historic preservation grant agreements and addendums.
Good afternoon. Ed Sieben, Zoning and Planning Director for City of Aurora. This is an information-only item for Finance Committee. This was presented yesterday to the BZE Committee, which did recommend approval. I know Alderman Franco, you did see it, and Alderman Donnell did see it yesterday. but I'll just be real brief. We just have a real brief PowerPoint Tracy's running. But this is really phase 2 for the 2024 Historic Preservation Grant Program. I just want to give a shout out to Jill Morgan, who is our preservation planner and senior planner, who runs the program for us. She did have, unfortunately, a death in the family, so she's not able to be here this week. But she did put this together. There's a total of $250,000 that's allocated for the program this year, and there was $183,000 left after the phase 1 projects were awarded for 2024. We had 21 applicants that came in, and 14 were recommended by the Preservation Commission for a total of $182,901. So we're within $99 of that. So I can just real briefly just show exterior of these. There's 14 of them. 18 South Roost Street. This is near East Side. This is chimney restoration for $7,205. And just real quick, I must say that the maximum grant amount is for $20,000. There is an additional $1,000 if there's local contractors, so it's $21,000 max. Anything above $10,000 has to be matched by the homeowner. And these are also in the Historic Preservation District, or they're landmarked, and they're all owner-occupied properties. So that is number 1. Number 2 next is 219, and again, that's in the Near East Side Historic District. Number 2, if you go to the next one, Tracy. 219 West Park, this is in the Tanner District. It's a masonry porch restoration for $10,813. Number 3, 238 Lawndale, Riddle Highlands, window restoration, $18,733. Number 4, 361 Lawndale Avenue, Riddle Highlands, tuck pointing, $13,029. Number 5, this is an interesting house. This is the Ford House. I believe there's some sort of an open house also this weekend. 404 South Edgelon. This is a local landmark. This, excuse me, for a skylight restoration for $10,000. Number 6, 418 Palace Street, Tanner District porch restoration, $16,423. Number 7, 464 Palace Street in the Tanner District also. Wood storm windows, $11,176. Number 8, 506 Oak Avenue, also Tanner, window and door restoration, $16,973. Number 9, 515 Oak Avenue, Tanner District, chimney restoration, $2,280. Number 10, this is a local landmark, 535 West Downer Place. Siding repair and painting, $15,350. Number 11, this will become a local landmark as part of the funding. 547 Fifth Street, foundation stabilization to the historic garage for $21,000. Number 12, 625 Oak Avenue, Tanner District, door restoration and custom wood screen doors, $82.50. Number 13 is 742 Oak Avenue, Riddle Highlands, porch restoration, $10,669. And then one final one. This one's a local landmark. This is up by the DuPage Forest Preserve there, 2888 North Eola Road. This is just a little south of Butterfield. This is a local landmark. This is for tuck pointing and chimney restoration, $21,000. Is there any questions?
Questions or comments? Alderman Bug.
Just, I'm very interested in that. I didn't know that was in the city limits.
Yes, yes.
Okay. That the soccer park that the park district has next to it, that's not in the city limits, is it?
This is on the west side of the street. I think the soccer is on the east side of Eola, correct?
Is it?
Yeah, we go all the way up to Batavia.
Oh, I know we do, but
Butterfield.
it jogs in and out what's in the city, what's not. Okay, good to know.
Any other questions or comments? Well, this was information only, so thank you. I
This will be
appreciate
at COW.
Okay.
Jill will be here then if there's any questions on
great.
Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is held item 24-0605, discussion of matters related to the formation and making of a recommendation as to fixing of compensation of elected officials pursuant to the Local Government Officer Compensation Act. And as we discussed last time, we had the data from the ferry, Corn Ferry, talked about mayors versus the aldermanic things. I think we were basically tasking ourselves with looking at some numbers again. I think we were pretty close. Discussion was pretty good last time, so I guess what I'll start out here is asking for any new input, any recommendations from the committee members, and then I'll kind of, chime in at the end and say what my recommendation is for particular numbers and why. So if there's anybody that wants to start or has any specific numbers or observations, please chime in.
I'll just, after the last time we talked about this, which seems like forever ago, I'm not gonna lie, so, I was talking about maybe some tiered percentages, but after thinking about it more in a discussion with some of my colleagues, I think I agree that it should be something standard across the board, not 3% for here or 5% for there or something, so I just wanted to let everybody know that I changed my opinion on that, so.
Okay, that's a good one. Anybody else?
Yes.
Alderman Bug.
Thank you. I shared some numbers, and so I wanted to give you kind of a breakdown of this. And I will just, thank you for each year on this to start. So as I mentioned in the past, I always try to look in the Corn Ferry study, little more so focused on the state, which just because of our number doesn't really lend itself. There are no cities in the state of Illinois between 160 and 220,000 people other than the city of Aurora. So I try to stay in the Midwest and go for exactly what we have in this body. And so I looked all through the Midwest. There's basically 5 or 6 cities in the Midwest, between 180 and 215,000 population. So I wanted to pull out the salary, the number of members they have, kind of where they were and where they're going. Des Moines is at the high end. They're at 215,000. They were a couple years ago at 28,000 a year, and they did a bump that goes in effect this year to make them at 35,000 a year. Grand Rapids, they're kind of on a graduated level. Last year 31, up to next year at 33.5. Akron is the city that I mentioned before, which is almost a mirror of what we have. They have 13 aldermen, so they just have 1 extra alderman at large. They have 10 wards, they have 3 aldermen at large. I could only get a record back to back a couple years ago. So back a couple years ago, they were at 35 or 34.6. They have what's called the president of the council. I don't know how that works, but they got a little bit more. And I didn't have the number for this year, but I believe it's 3 to 4% above that each year, so they're at about 36 right now. Under full transparency, I wanted to pull in all of them. Kansas sometimes is called a Midwest state, sometimes it's called a Plains state. I wanted to pull them in. They're kind of an outlier, but I wanted to put it there for you. They're way low. They have 12 aldermen, but they're way low. And of course, there are ones outliers. There's Wichita's up near 52, and tell you the truth, there's a city over 100,000, and their city council members are volunteers. So we're not going to go back.
Ouch. No.
So, yeah, the mayor gets a $200 a month stipend.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, so this is the information that I found about the cities that are right at our size in the Midwest, what's happening. And basically, when we sat down 4 years ago, and I went back twice, so I gave that information when we went back to 16. But 4 years ago, we were in the throes of COVID. And we understood that. We understood what that meant to the city, that we were not going to. And actually what we did that first year is we froze it, 0, no increase whatsoever. And that needed to happen. And then we went 3, 3, and 5 on the last year, knowing that we needed to make up some ground from being at 0 for a year, and nobody knew what COVID was going to lay out for us. What COVID did lay out was 12 and 14% inflation. So although we had good intentions, 3% versus 14 just, wasn't keeping up with it. And that's why, and I mentioned this, as Ron said, we've talked about this for a little while, a number of council have put forward what I call a bump, where you get to a level and then you go up, up, up. We did that, and that's why I gave us the information. We did that 2 cycles ago with the mayor. The mayor's salary was $114,000. And we took a look at that, and we looked at the region, and although, doing a bump, and we did a $30,000 we went up. He went from 114 to 147. So that was a bump. But it was necessary to get him back into the mix of where the compensation was, and looking cities, similar size, similar budgets, those types of things. So, so that's what I wanted to lay out. I feel that we need a bump to get us anywhere near. So all 3 of those are about in 2024 at about $34,000, $35,000 a year. We're unfortunately right now at $23,600. So in my mind, I had a number at first, and then I looked more at the numbers, and I was like, okay, if I put that number out there, because that's for 2027, kind of already ate it up. The number I threw out there in my mind at first wasn't going to be large enough. I just want to give the data, and then I will share this with you. And I shared this before, but I just want you to see it, because I talked about that other cities are doing this. So this is Richmond, Virginia. They just did it this year. They were 230,000 people. 230,000 people. They were at 25, so they were right near us. And coming out of COVID, they felt like they were not compatible with the region and whatnot. They did a $20,000 bump, so they went from 25,000 to 45,000. That's sizable. I don't know if we could meet that type of, God love them, Virginia. I don't think that would fly here. But I think we need a number to get us we need to be near 30 and then kind of move on from there.
I'm just doing a little math here, because I think when we talk about percentages, that's great, but when you talk about a percentage for somebody making 177,000 compared to somebody making 24 or 25,000, it's, a little bit different. It is a little bit different. So as I looked at the mayor's salary, personally, if I went with, because I think we feel that he's probably, or I shouldn't say he, that position is in a sweet spot. It's pretty good. So I think if you were to go up, and I'm just throwing 2.5% out, 2.5% is about a $4,400 increase per year, but it goes up a little bit because we, compound it. That seems, to me, if you just look at $4,400, that seems fairly reasonable if you're already in the sweet spot. Because I guess going forward, you never can project inflation, but 2.5% to 3% seems to be what all contracts are generically based on, because that's typical over a 10-year period. So to me, if we were to 2.5% to 3% for the mayor, I think that would be good across the board. Our thing is a little bit different because we don't know that we're in the sweet spot. Again, we have variables. One of the variables is $90 a meeting. How does that equate versus others? How does the health insurance equate versus others? We don't know for sure. So are we at 23-ish, or are we at 31, 32-ish? That's kind of where we're at. So if we're trying to go up, and I would agree that we want to go up to get maybe to 30, if we were to do a 4% increase, that's $1,000 a year. That may not get us where we want to go, if we're looking at that. If we go a 5% increase, we're probably talking about $1,200, and then compound it after that. So I think when I came in today, and I listened to Alderman Bug, and it makes a lot of sense, and these numbers do too. Although, again, if you look at Des Moines, 214,000 people, 6 aldermen. All right, well, that's twice as much workload as we have. So do you factor that in? You kind of have to a little bit, because it's based on what you're doing. So I think I would be comfortable with a minimum of 4% for us across the board, maybe 5%. I think I would be very comfortable with 2.5% or 3% for the mayor, and I think that's kind of the ballpark. I think it does a couple things. It kind of gets us up there to where we want to be for aldermen. And again, it's probably a reasonable amount based on what the data that I'm seeing, workload, how many people you have, factoring in the $90 a meeting, which I think is a pretty generous thing too. That would put us at about 35,000 if you factor all that in. So I'm just throwing those numbers out there because those, ballpark-wise, I'm pretty comfortable with for the mayor and for us based on what you were saying. So if you guys got some input on that, and then we maybe could put a real number on it, and then we'll tell COW, if we can come out here today with that, why we did what we did, what our thought process was. Because I think it's all very good input here, and I think we're really close. So does anybody have, based on what we just seen, any numbers that they would think are appropriate going forward, based on some of the things I said?
I agree with your numbers. I think 4% for us would be, at least a minimum of 4% would be good. And the mayor, because that position is already in the sweet spot, that 2.5, I'd be 100% on board with that.
Right. Because like I said, 4% for us is $1,000. All right, so if we're at 25 at the end of 2026, it's going to put us about 30 at 2030. But but based on this, we could be behind some other cities. So. I would propose, a 2.5 for the mayor. I think that would be fair. I would propose for us, based on these other numbers, because we're going to have to be able to defend them. I could see us going to 5% for 4 years. I think, because the other thing is too, not only is that, in this world right now, we want to make sure we still got quality people, and I think we offer enough for that. But at the end of the day, it matters. And if you're doing this as a part-time job. So most people probably have a full-time job. That's a lot of workload for them. Is it going to be worth it for them to say, I got my 40 hours a week and then I got my other 20 hours a week here? Is that worth it for me? So that's another thing I think we've talked about too, but we didn't take into consideration. So if somebody wants to make a motion,
I just have it on point too. So
Sure.
quick math, I think over 4 years or whatever, that starts in 2027, that gets us about that 30,000 mark at 5%.
Well, so we're going to be about 25,000 at 2026.
Yeah.
So you're talking the first year 5% will be 1,200 more. So you're at 26.
Yeah, I did the kind of the
something
quick
like
math.
that.
It was just
Something
I just
along
took
those
it
lines.
times
Right.
yeah, and kind of compounded
Right.
it as well too. But again, simple quick math or something like that puts us almost at 29,000. So
Right.
I mean, again, when you're not, again, I don't want to say it's not a small number, but when you're talking 1%, it's whether it's 4 or 5, I don't think.
Well, and I've also talked to Chris Minnick, and I've talked to the mayor's office about this in advance, and the numbers we're talking about is easily absorbed in the budget. This is not a budget breaker at all. For $600 million budget, it's really not. It's not like, oh, if we do this, then we gotta cut back over here. That's not how it's going to be.
And number one, I appreciate all the work you put into this, Alderman Bug. That was definitely a help. I'm comfortable with the 5%. I just think that even inflation at 3%, I think is a bit archaic, honestly. So To think that, number one, we're playing catch-up, and number two,
Right.
that we're ever going to get to a 3% inflation rate in the next 4 years.
Right.
We may or may not, but again, if this can be absorbed by the budget as is, and it's not going to do anything, I would be in support of a 5%.
Right, and I will say this too, and those are all good points, and I would say this too, because of what happened the last 2 years, about 14% bump over 2 years, even if it comes down a little bit, we're still above, it's gonna always be above a 3% average for that period of time. And what we do here is we're trying to catch up. So in 4 years, how are we gonna catch up to what just happened the last 2 years? Well, that kind of does it. And I think we'll always be doing that, which is fine, but I think we have to look at historically what has happened recently and throw that into the equation going forward somewhat. And I think that what we were doing if we went to 5%, I think I'd be a little reluctant to go over 5, but I think 5 would be fair to go with right now. So so I would ask for a proposal, a motion for numbers for both, and then we can go on with that.
So in a second, or?
Well, let's make a motion for, let's do
change
this.
the
Let's start with the
term
mayor's.
of
Let's
the-
start with the mayor's, or mayor's compensation. So is there a proposal?
So the first one's discussion only, and then this is the motion.
Okay, so, all right, thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so for the first one, we've discussed, so, let's go to 24-0608, a motion and recommendation with respect to mayoral compensation pursuant to the Local Government Officer Compensation Act. Is there a recommendation for the mayor?
I recommend that the mayor's compensation be at a 2.5%.
Each year for 4 years, starting in
Each year, yep.
2027.
2027, correct.
Okay. Is there a second on that?
A second.
All right, we have a second on that. Is there any further discussion on that particular matter? Hearing none, all in favor with that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion passes. So we'll be going 2.5, bringing the COW 2.5% for 4 years for the mayor. Next item on the agenda is 24-0611, a motion and recommendation with respect to the aldermanic compensation pursuant to the Local Government Officer Compensation Act. Is there a proposal for that?
I would propose a 5% for the next for 4 years, starting 2027 for the aldermanic compensation.
Is there a second for that?
I second that.
Is there any other discussion on that particular one?
Yeah,
On the
briefly.
vote?
And taking everything into account, and I know you put back in the compensation for the meetings, but when you add that back in the meetings, my analysis was just for compensation. So these bodies who make $35,000 a year right now also get compensation for meetings.
Okay.
So if you factor that in, they're up at 43.
Do we know what
So-
they're getting per, I mean, I guess I don't know what they're getting per
No,
meeting, but yeah.
no,
all
I
right.
mean, it's hard to dig all that out. Kind of Corn Ferry was talking about that.
Yeah, all right.
When they were trying to look for it. But, so, I tried to put it as much as I could, apples to apples. And that's why I looked at Akron so hard. Exact same number, aldermen, same makeup, 10 wards, 3 at large. 2 years ago, they were 35,000. So, we can't go that high, but I really feel like, and that we need to consider a bump and then increments. Because if we started, because we're going 3 years from now, 2027 is when we're starting. So, to go up there to 5%, 5%, 5%, you're at 20, 30, 31. And then, in comparison, we look at those cities then, they're gonna be at, what, 45? So we're gonna get to 30, and they're gonna be 45.
Will be 30 plus the per diem, or the meeting per diem?
Yeah.
Are you including that in your?
No,
No,
I'm just talking
straight
straight
salary?
compensation. Because they're at 35 now, in 2024,
Oh, yeah,
they're
yeah.
35.
Well, that's why it is, if you're going with comparables, it's so hard because we don't know. Are they getting money per meeting? If they are, is it $90? Is it $50? Is it $40? How many meetings do they go to? It's just, it's very difficult. you
It
know,
is,
it
and
is,
that's why when we've analyzed this in the past, we just look at compensation. I know Ron was talking about the benefit packages, and some, I found some, like Des Moines, they get a benefit package, health insurance, all that. But rarely do they, throw that out there in the information. But, so when we did the analysis in 2016 for the mayor, it was on compensation, straight. We didn't look, is that mayor getting a car, like our mayor gets a car allowance.
Right, car allowance, right.
We didn't look at all that stuff. We looked straight compensation. He was at 114. That was way low compared to the similar cities in the Midwest. Even in the state, we were lower than some in the state, and they were two-thirds the size of us. So that's what we've done in the past, and that's I feel like we need a lump sum bump, and then increments after that.
So I would think, at some point, I would agree that there has to be some sort of, because we're always playing catch-up, it seems like, or have been. What if, and I don't know if anybody wants to do this now, because I think we have some time constraints as far as getting something through this, but would there be a possibility of, and Corn Ferry seemed like they turned around fairly quickly what they provided for us, but what if there was a committee of some sort that actually called Akron and said, hey, what do you guys get for the, and actually kind of really rolled up their sleeves and dug into it, whether that's a committee formed amongst ourselves or something Corn Ferry could really dig into, or somebody, an existing department here could do that and say, get it closer to apples and apples versus speculation. Does it have health benefits? Does it has a car package and things like that? So we're kind of looking at a clearer picture would be that. But I would, and I agree that there needs to be some sort of bump. But I think having the data and the exact apples to apples comparison, I think I would be a little more comfortable with it. So, and if it's blatantly that far off, then we can. I don't want to say justify, but, feel more comfortable with a one-time bump to get things where they may need to be.
There's always the cost of living thing too. So let's say Indiana is making less or more than us, what's their cost of living? I mean, that really comes into play too, because obviously if you live in the Chicagoland area versus in Arkansas, you're gonna make more for the same job in Chicagoland area because cost of living. I don't know how that equates into, you could always throw it into the mix, but we could find variables. I mean, there's a lot of things you can consider, so
I'm just saying something to start now, so.
Well, all right, so let's just say that we want to catch up. All right, let's just throw out a number. If we were throwing 10% on 25,000 or $2,500 on the first year, and then you went 5%, and 5%, and 5%. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how we can get there. And that wouldn't be the consistent across the board, but if you're talking about the one-time bump, if we do a 10%, then 5, 5, 5. Now you're talking 5% was before was like 1,200, it would probably be about 1,500 because you're up there now, 1,500. 4,500 on top of the 2,500 is 7,000. Now you're at 32,000. I'm just kind of, if we're looking for a number to get to, a real number as opposed to percentage, but percentage to get us there. Does that gets us about 32 with a 10, 5, 5? I mean, there's always that. And I have no problem with that. I mean, I do feel we should get it. I just think there's so many things that we'll never know. So doing what we can to get as much apples to apples as we can, but having that out there about how much you get for health insurance, what do you pay for a meeting and stuff like that, it's always going to be difficult. And then cost of living increases. So I guess, before we go on with that motion and vote on it, do we feel that getting us up to about 32,000-ish or more in the basically the 2031, right? 2031 would be an appropriate amount. And if we feel that, then we would probably have to we'd have to remove that motion if we feel that way and maybe go to 10, 5, 5 and make that 10 basically getting us up there. Because you start talking more than that, the other thing is too, there's people out there going to be watching, they got a 10% increase, that's why you have to watch what those increases are. So I would feel more comfortable, I wouldn't want to go 10% across the board, but I would feel comfortable say, this is a catch-up thing. Because we can make the argument, you have to make arguments, you have to say why this is. If we feel in 2 years, 14% went up, then we could say the first year is 10, the second year is 5, Now we're caught up, and let's go forward. You can make that because that's what historical data tells us. Because you're gonna have to have that argument. And we can come into a COW meeting and say, 14%, so we're giving ourselves basically a 14% for 2 years, even though we're behind, and then we're gonna level off again at 5%. Would that be something that would be reasonable?
I mean, if you look at 10% or 5%, it's $100 a month we're talking about.
Right,
you know,
but,
so-
but there's, I'm telling you,
Oh, I get it.
there's things there. So I think I would feel comfortable making that argument that 2 years, inflation went up 14%, we're gonna catch that up, and then we're gonna level off. Reasonable? Okay, so,
Because 5% the second year, after you've given the 10%, of course,
Yep.
it compounds.
it
So,
compounds, right.
And that's kind of what these other cities are doing too. Where you see Des Moines went from 28.8, they didn't give their salary for last year, but they went to 35. So they went up 7,000 over 2 years.
Right.
So they were trying to.
Right. So, all right, so we had a motion and a second on the original 5555. Does the person that made the motion want to retract that motion for a new motion?
I retract that motion for a new motion of the 10% initial catch-up, then 5% after that, compounded after, and so forth and so
Okay,
forth.
so I'll clarify this. So the first year in 2027, well, it'll be 2028, would be 10%, then 5%, 5%, and 5% over the 4-year period. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second. Okay, any other discussion on that then?
It just, why'd you say 2028?
Well, it went through, doesn't it go through 20, well, it goes through halfway through 2027.
Yeah, middle
So,
of
all
the
right,
year.
so middle of
15 years.
2027 on, right,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry about that, right.
That's okay.
Yeah, right, yeah, because it's halfway through, it's not, it's a
Like, we're
fiscal.
not gonna get paid in 2027.
Right, no, right, okay. So with that, no more, if we have no more discussion, all in favor on that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 4-0. Good, thank you. It really was good. I really like this because we had good discussion up here about that, and we tried to get all the angles, so I appreciate all the work you did and what you guys came in. So with that,
I'll give you one point of wisdom. Some of these councils are moving it, kind of like we had a special before we
Right.
set up these things. They're moving this compensation commission to other people. So those other people take a look at everything, and we don't vote on it, they do.
well, it's
So-
easier. I mean, it's cleaner. I don't know how it's gonna come out, but it's cleaner. All right, so if there's nothing further to come before the Finance
to
Committee
adjourn.
today, we have a motion to adjourn by Alderman Warman, second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? And we are adjourned at 5:29. Thank you.